Sophie Cunningham. Oh, man. I got to tell you, this victory, it came with a big price.
The entire arena went silent. 1 second, Sophie Cunningham was fighting through contact like she always does, and the next, she was on the floor, clutching her knee, her face twisted in pain. For a moment, it felt like time stopped. Fans froze in their seats, teammates stood motionless, and the Indiana Fever, already hanging by a thread, looked like they had just lost the one player holding them together. This wasn't just another fall. This was the collapse of the heart and soul of Indiana's roster. The fighter who never backed down, the spark who kept the team alive when Caitlin Clark went down, the one player opponents couldn't intimidate. And yet in one brutal collision, that fire was ripped away. Some called it an accident. Others called it something far worse. But no matter how you saw it, the moment Sophie hit the hardwood, the question became chillingly clear. Was this the breaking point for Indiana, or the spark that would ignite their greatest fight yet? It all unraveled in a split second. Bria Hartley drove baseline, Kelsey Mitchell trailing her step for step. Sophie Cunningham slid over to help, her body planted, ready to cut off the lane. But instead of stopping the play, Hartley lost control and came crashing down, her full weight folding directly onto Sophie's knee. The sound alone was enough to make people wince. Sophie's scream echoed through the arena as she clutched her leg, writhing in pain. Teammates sprinted toward her, fans covered their mouths in shock, and the Fever bench could only stare in disbelief. This wasn't the kind of fall you bounce back from. This wasn't a bruise or twisted ankle. This looked like the kind of injury that can end not just a season, but a career. And that's what made the moment so terrifying, because Sophie isn't the type to stay down. She's the player who pops back up after hard hits, who laughs off bruises, who throws herself into the grind night after night. But this time, there was no bounce, no smile, just raw agony. As the cameras cut to commercial, a chilling realization settled in. Indiana's defensive anchor, the one who had become their backbone in Caitlin Clark's absence, might have just been ripped away in an instant. The arena had gone from deafening energy to complete silence. It felt like watching the air get sucked right out of the building. For some fans, what happened to Sophie looked like a freak accident. But for anyone who's been following Bria Hartley's career, it felt like the latest chapter in a long, ugly pattern. Because this wasn't the first time her name was tied to chaos. Far from it. Just last week, Hartley yanked Angel Reese by the ponytail, dragging her to the floor like it was some kind of wrestling stunt. Before that, she ripped Becca Allen down by the head, sending her crashing awkwardly to the hardwood. And not long ago, she was in the middle of a heated scuffle with Ariel Atkins, a clash that only ended when teammates physically pulled her away. Different games, different opponents, same story. A reckless collision, an angry reaction, a reputation that just kept getting worse. And that's why the moment Sophie collapsed, fans didn't buy the bad luck explanation. They didn't see an accident. They saw a pattern, a repeat offender getting away with dirty play while officials looked the other way.
It was the kind of moment that reignited an old debate across the WNBA. Has the league lost control of its physicality? Because if one player can stack up a highlight reel of cheap shots and still keep playing without serious consequences, then how long before someone's career ends because of it? The moment Sophie was helped off the floor, the outrage began to pour in. Fans weren't just sad, they were furious. Furious at Hartley, furious at the officials, furious at a league that seemed blind to what everyone else could see. Social media lit up in seconds, and the anger only grew louder when Sophie's own family weighed in. Her sister, Lindsay, didn't hold back. She blasted the WNBA in a post that went viral instantly, saying maybe instead of fining players for speaking up, the league should hire referees who can actually protect athletes. She called the officiating pathetic, dangerous, a system that was failing the very players it was supposed to protect. Then came Sophie's mother, Paula, and if Lindsay's words were sharp, Paula's were a dagger. She called Hartley a disgruntled player who has left trouble everywhere she's gone, flat out labeling her reckless and mean-spirited. These weren't just emotional reactions from family members in the heat of the moment. They echoed what players and fans across the league have been saying for months, that the WNBA is letting chaos spiral out of control, that officials are swallowing their whistles while stars are getting knocked out of games left and right. And now, with Sophie lying on the hardwood, tears streaming down her face, that frustration had a face, a story, a human cost. Fans weren't just angry anymore, they were demanding answers. For Indiana, this wasn't just another injury. It was like ripping the heartbeat straight out of the roster. Sophie Cunningham wasn't the star on the stat sheet, but she was the spark that gave this team its edge. Since Caitlin Clark went down, Sophie had been more than just a fill-in. She had become the glue. She was the one diving across the floor for loose balls, locking up the opponent's best scorer, barking encouragement when teammates' shoulders started to slump. She was averaging double figures, shooting over 50% from deep, and doing all the dirty work no one else wanted to touch. But her value went beyond numbers. Sophie was the enforcer, the protector, the emotional engine. She was the one who stood up when opponents tried to bully Caitlin, the one who refused to let Indiana fold, even when critics had already written them off. So when she went down, it didn't just feel like losing points or rebounds, it felt like losing an identity. The fighter who made this team believe in itself was suddenly gone, and the silence in the arena said it all. This wasn't just a tough moment, it was the kind of blow that can break a locker room spirit. For the Fever, battered by injuries and running on fumes, the timing couldn't have been worse. Just as they were clawing for a playoff spot, their fiercest competitor might be lost. And with her, their slim shot at survival could vanish too. The most infuriating part wasn't just that Sophie went down, it was how it happened. Right in front of officials who swallowed their whistles, a player with a long history of reckless fouls slammed into Indiana's defensive anchor, and instead of protecting athletes, the referees let it slide like it was nothing.
That's what turned heartbreak into outrage. Because by now, this wasn't just about one foul or one player. It was about a league that has allowed reckless play to spiral unchecked all season long. Over and over, players have been shoved, slammed, and dragged to the ground while the game keeps moving like it's normal. Fans don't tune in to watch a cage fight. They come to see basketball. But too often, what they're seeing looks like open season on anyone with a target on their back. And Sophie's injury made the cost impossible to ignore. This wasn't just a bruise or a cut. This was a player in tears, unable to stand, maybe done for the year. The kind of image that sticks with you long after the game ends. That's why fans began asking the bigger question. Does the WNBA really value the safety of its stars? Because when a player with Hartley's rap sheet keeps getting chance after chance, the question stops being, was this an accident? And becomes, why is this allowed to happen in the first place? For Indiana, the consequences were immediate and devastating. But for the league, the consequences could be far worse. Every time a moment like this happens, trust in the officials erodes. The credibility of the game itself gets questioned. And until someone steps in to restore order, the players are the ones left paying the price. By the time the first half ended, it felt like Indiana's season was being buried in real time. Sophie was gone, the bench was shaken, and the scoreboard told the brutal truth. Down 19 at the break against one of the most physical teams in the league. The atmosphere inside the locker room was grim. A team already running on hardship deals and short rotations had just lost the player who held them together. Fans at home were already bracing for the worst, scrolling through timelines filled with fear that Sophie's season and Indiana's playoff hopes had just evaporated in a single reckless play. On the court, the body language said it all. Shoulders slumped, energy flat. The Fever looked like a team on the verge of collapse. For weeks, they had fought to stay alive without Caitlin Clark, but now, stripped of their toughest warrior, it felt like the breaking point. Most teams in that position fold. They accept the loss, go through the motions, and prepare excuses for the post-game press conference. And to be honest, nobody would have blamed Indiana if they did the same. The hole was deep, the opponent was relentless, and their spirit looked shattered. But what happened next would flip that script completely. And then, something flipped. Instead of folding, Indiana came alive. Kelsey Mitchell stormed out of the locker room like a player possessed, drilling jumper after jumper and refusing to let her team sink. Every possession, she carried herself like a superstar who wasn't ready to let the night end in heartbreak. Odyssey Sims, signed on a hardship deal just days earlier, suddenly looked like a veteran leader who had been waiting her whole career for this moment. She brought grit, energy, and fire, setting the tone that Indiana wasn't going down without a fight. Aaliyah Boston went to war on the boards, ripping down rebounds and muscling through the Suns' front line. Natasha Howard matched her intensity inside, banging bodies and forcing Connecticut to earn every bucket. And then there was Lexi Hull, the sharpshooter, who, with the game hanging in the balance, rose up from deep and buried the dagger three that sealed the comeback.
Possession by possession, the Fever clawed their way back. The 19-point halftime deficit shrank. The arena, once silent and tense, began to roar. And before long, history was unfolding. The biggest rally in franchise history pulled off on a night when they had every reason to quit. Against one of the league's most physical teams, stripped of their defensive anchor, Indiana refused to bow. They turned heartbreak into fuel, pain into fire, and despair into the most improbable win of their season. What unfolded that night went far beyond the scoreboard. Yes, Indiana pulled off the biggest rally in franchise history, but the win was more than numbers or highlights. It was a statement about resilience, about heart, and about the spirit of a team that refuses to be broken. Sophie Cunningham may have been forced off the floor, but her toughness never left the game. You could see it in every loose ball her teammates dove for, every rebound ripped down, every shot taken with fearless confidence. Her fight lived on through them. For the Fever, this wasn't just about clawing back from a 19-point haul. It was about proving that even when their identity seems ripped away, they can still rise. It was about showing the league, and every critic counting them out, that Indiana's heart beats too strong to be silenced by one injury. Sophie's loss casts a heavy shadow, no doubt, but on that night, her teammates carried her fire with them, and instead of letting the moment break them, they turned it into their defining memory of the season. This was more than basketball. It was heartbreak and history colliding in a single game, and it left one undeniable truth. No matter how hard the Fever get hit, they will always find a way to rise again. So what looked like the end for Indiana became something else entirely. A miracle, a message, and a reminder that this team's heart can't be measured on a stat sheet. They lost Sophie Cunningham, the glue that held them together, and still found a way to rise again. And here's the question every fan is asking now. If the Fever can rally like this without Sophie, what happens when Caitlin Clark returns to the floor? One thing's for sure, Indiana's story is far from finished. If you want to stay on top of every twist, every controversy, and every comeback, make sure to subscribe, because the fight is only just beginning.